taking a peek at the steering wheel as well as the cluster screen inside of the Ford F150. Now there are a few different types of cluster screens that are available, but this is the XLT. So XL, XLT are going to have very similar clusters, but then when you get into the Lariat, King Ranch, etc., it's fully digital. But if you want to walk through on the fully digital screen instead, you'll find it down in the description of this video. But let's go through some basics. The first thing to point out, the steering wheel inside of the XL and the XLT are going to be manual telescoping. So just by your left knee, there's a little release, slide in, out, up and down, then lock it back into place. There is technically the option for heated steering wheel, but you're not going to find that until you get into some of the higher trims of the vehicle. So this one, not going to be heated as an option. Series of different buttons that are available on the left and the right pads. So the one on the left pad there is going to be for just your regular cruise control. So you can toggle cruise control on or off that way. And then as you start driving, you can then set it or then increase or decrease 1 kilometer or 1 mile per hour at a time. This is the cancel resume button. So if you've got cruise control going, you can hit the brake if you want to, or you can press this to cancel cruise and then press again in order to resume to your previously set speed. There is the option for the adaptive cruise control system too, which this one doesn't have. That's your set it and forget it cruise. But if you want to walk through on the adaptive cruise system, you'll find that video down in the description of this video. There's this button, which is for the lane keeping system. Lane keeping works 3 different ways. So way number 1, if you start to veer over into another lane without signaling, it'll either shake the steering wheel. Way number 2, it'll gently nudge you back into your lane. Or number 3, it'll do a mixture of both. So it'll shake the steering wheel while it also nudges you back into your lane. And those are all settings that you could technically set up yourself if you want to. I'll show you that one in just a second. So you could toggle that one on off. There's volume rockers there, so increase, decrease audio, and then there's a voice command prompt. So you'll be able to do things like change songs, radio stations, navigate using your voice, and a number of other things. Really useful setting. This one also doubles as a button for your assistant. So if you're hooked up through an iPhone or Android, you'd be able to use either Google or Siri Assistant by pushing and holding. So it's a longer press and hold there to activate. Buttons along the side there, so you can change between songs or radio stations. Presets, ooh, love that song. But along the very bottom there, watch this. So you can just do a gentle push, so single push, let's say, and that's jumping in between different presets. But then if we're on any of these sources, so AM, FM, Sirius XM, if you do a longer press and hold, watch that. So you can see we're kind of seeking out that way instead. So you could do a single press in order to change between presets, or a longer press and hold if you wanted to be able to seek instead. So it's like seek up versus seek down. So that is available. You can also answer or hang up on a phone call. Now all of these buttons are going to help us navigate through the cluster screen, which I'll touch on in just a second. So the only other thing to point out, going to be your left turn stick. So you've got obviously for turning there, flash out your high beams, and then you've got your windshield wiper speed with a button on the very tip of this stick in order to actually turn your wipers on. So just down by my left knee, there's a switch there, and you've got a series of different options that are available for your lamps. I always just recommend keeping yourself in the auto mode because that's automatically going to turn the lights on or off as necessary. And that's going to work in conjunction with auto high beams if they're turned on. But if you want your high beams permanently on, you've got that flexibility. So all you have to do is get out of the auto mode. So if you're wondering why your high beams, I should say, aren't permanently locking on in this mode, is because you're in the auto mode. So the vehicle is going to determine when they're coming on, when they're turning off, etc. But if you go into headlamp mode, flip away, you can permanently lock your high beams out there instead if you want to. Like I said, I always just recommend keeping yourself in the auto mode. So looking at the actual cluster screen, and all I'm going to do is just using the button pad along the outside there. But I want to navigate through the cluster and show you everything that you need to know. So you've obviously got your tachometer off to the left side, speedometer off to the right side, and then a series of different gauges along the very top. So you can adjust the gauges out, which I'll show you in just a second, and then the base layout. You've got current, kilometers that the vehicle's traveled, what gear you're currently in, and then that even kind of dictates a few other things. So if we go down to the drive mode, you can also put yourself into a manual mode to adjust gears out that way instead if you want to. So there are a few different ways that you can kind of adjust gears out as you go here. Very straightforward. But along the bottom right-hand side there, you've also got current fuel level to empty. So you can see the fuel gauge along the very top right side there, but if you wanted a visual different representation, you can see that along the very bottom right side. So let's go through using the buttons there. So you can just push up and down to get to all of these different subscreens. So you've got your calming screen versus fuel economy, which you can press and hold OK to reset. dropping down to your trip counter, and same idea, you can reset these trip counters if you want to. And all you're going to do, press and hold OK in order to reset. So you can see that resetting, and boom, reset there. You've also got the My View. So if you go OK to My View, that's going to give you the flexibility to do a few other things. So you can add in a series of other options here. It does limit you which ones you can add in, so there's a certain limit, but let's go through which one would be useful. Distribution, now playing, trip counters, this trip. Let's go seatbelts and tire pressure. So we've added a few more in. So jumping back, you can see there, yeah, look at all the extra screens that were added in there now. So fuel economy, trip counter, tire pressure, seatbelts, off-road status. So you can see your vehicle pitch and roll. So you can see what's going on with your current turning angle, and then pitch and roll there as well. So you're essentially looking as your truck's tilting up or down for the gauge on the left there, and then side to side for the gauge on the right. So if you're going off-road, this information, very useful to know. And then you've got power distribution, so it's which wheel is getting which amount of power as you go. And then you can go back in order to configure the My View screen again. You can push the menu button along the side of the steering wheel there, and that's going to get you to this view. So My View is this one. So it's the view that we've set up. So you can go to a few different screens that are available there. And the look of the screen is going to depend on which other options are enabled or disabled. But going back through, there's trip and fuel information. So fuel economy, this trip versus your trip 1 counter, EV coaching, etc. You might not have certain ones like the EV coaching. So if you don't have the hybrid version of the F150, you wouldn't have the Eco Coach or the EV Coach. But you would have your basic trip counters. So you've got a few different trip options that are available. Moving back into truck information. So you can see what's going on with tire pressure, off-road distribution, power distribution, engine oil information, and then seatbelts. So what you're going to notice is that a lot of this information is kind of duplicated from your My View screen. But you could go up and down between any of these other options independently if you want, or you can get it done as a graphical interface. You've got towing information, so if you've got a trailer hooked up, but I mean, obviously you can see there, no trailer is currently connected. But if it was, you could see all of your basic towing information. You've also got your navigation information, so you can see your home, previous destinations, favorites, or point of interest icons that are nearby. So it's not going to be a full map displayed in the cluster. It's essentially going to be turn-by-turn directions. I can't show you the navigation inside of this one because this is a connected services vehicle, and connected services require an active connection in order to work. You can see basic phone information. So if a phone was set up, you'd be able to see missed calls, previous calls, and things like that. And then you'd be able to push the voice command prompt there if you wanted to make a phone call. Some basics for audio settings. You've got AM, FM, Sirius XM. It's essentially whatever sources are currently enabled for the vehicle. So if your phone was hooked up through Bluetooth, you would have that as an option. If you had a USB stick with MP3s hooked up, that would also show up as an available option. But you can cycle through any of those systems if you want. And then basic settings, so you can configure your gauges. So all the gauges along the very top. You could swap gauge positions if you want to and change out the middle two only. And then you can also see the left selectable gauge. So what information do you want showing there? So do you want the oil pressure or the turbo boost there instead? So you've got the option of adjusting things out slightly. Like, I mean, as you can see there, the far left and the far right gauges are always going to be the same, but it's the middle two gauges that you can customize a tiny little bit. Whether or not the speed is showing in miles or kilometers per hour. Braking coach, cross-border info, neutral tow, if you're towing the vehicle behind an RV, trailer, whatever the case may be. I'll drop a link down in the description showing you how the neutral tow servicing works. And then there's also options for vehicle maintenance. So if you're changing the oil yourself, you could do a reset there if you've changed out the oil. And then tire pressure, you can see what's going on with each wheel independently. I believe, your main menu, back to your My View. That is everything. So you don't have a ton of options for customization inside of this screen. It's a little bit more simplistic, but that's everything you need to know about the steering wheel as well as the cluster screen inside of the F150 XLT or the XL.